Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, it's Jory Rose. As I've been doing the past few weeks, I've been bringing on interviews that I recorded during the Surviving to Thriving Summit, How to Grow Through Adversity During the Pandemic, to bring them on as podcast episodes because it's just such great information. We need more people to get access to these resources. In today's episode, I'm talking with Tod Jacobs and Dr. Lynn, who are marriage and relationship experts coming to us all the way from Jerusalem. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. And if you want more information on the summit, you can access it at www.survivingtothriving.site. And all of that will be in the show notes as well. I hope you're well. Enjoy today's show. I am honored and pleased to welcome today's guests, Dr. Lynn and Tod Jacobs, coming to us all the way from Jerusalem. Gentlemen, welcome. Please introduce yourselves and share with our viewers what it is that you are going to be talking about and how we can go to thriving right now.
Sure. Maybe I'll jump in first. This is Todd. My own background is a strange, meandering background to starting to write a book about marriage. My own background includes time spent as an investigative journalist and time spent on Wall Street as an analyst, analyzing complex industries like telecom and media. And at a certain point about 17 years ago, my wife and I said there must be something more to do than figure out complex areas for people to invest. Maybe we can spend our time and figure out complex areas of life and help people be more successful in the way they live. So we got an idea to start an institute in Jerusalem with an old mentor of mine, and that was about the time that I met Peter here, and we sort of launched this venture, 15 years ago. We have had through our doors about 250 of kind of best and brightest Ivy Leaguers, and they're in their, generally speaking, mid-20s till about 40 years old. They take time off. They come to learn about the kind of classic Jewish mystical approaches to Jewish law, Jewish philosophy, business ethics, leadership, character development. And one of the other things that they wound up learning about quite a bit, and we wound up spending more and more time on, was the subject of preparing for, thinking about, conceptualizing, and then actually executing. I shouldn't use that word, perhaps, but let's call it navigating.
That was not a Freudian slip now, Todd, was it?
No. And let's call it expertly navigating and successfully navigating the very trying, at times trying and challenging arena of marriage.
Talk about a complex system to be able to handle how to make flow better.
That's right. Doesn't become more complex than that. But at a certain point, Peter and I looked back on our work and we said, wow, our divorce rate amongst our students over 15 years is about 1/10 the national average. Wow. And maybe we can sort of share some of these ideas with the world, which we believe are very, universal, beautiful ideas, if a person's willing to do the work.
I think that's amazing. And we'll have you hop in just a moment, Peter, but it's, Todd, I love how you, again, went from this macro exploration of systems and were able to narrow down the paths to which to create greater flow and ease. Because in all systems, we get stuck.
Yeah, well, there's no question that when we have a better understanding of the framework in which we're operating, by the way, in most areas of life, we get that framework very clear before we go in. There's no one who goes into practicing law and just jumps in and starts trying cases and defending people. They start out with a big framework and they learn it, but marriage, nobody does the work in advance, and that's why we generally fail.
I've thought about that so much. I do a lot of parenting work as well, and it's well, I had parents, so I know how to be a parent, and yet just because we are in a relationship doesn't mean we know how to be in a relationship. So Peter, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this point of their journey with Todd.
So basically I was my history was in my background's in architecture, and I was pursuing the world of infrastructure, physical infrastructure.
So again, you are also creating balance and structure and needing to streamline organization.
And I decided
relationship to marriage.
and I decided that instead of building physical buildings, I wanted to build people. And that really led to a huge change as far as my life is concerned. And that really led me down the path of where I met Todd. And together we've been running this institution for the past 15 years. And I've also pursued heavily the world of psychology. I'm especially focusing on the field of positive psychology. I had the privilege to go spend time with the founder of the field, Marty Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania.
Could you define for people who may not know exactly, I mean, it seems intuitive, but could you define just for a moment what exactly positive psychology means?
So positive psychology is the basic world of psychology today is built on a disease model, meaning these are the problems, let's fix them. Positive psychology says, let's take a different approach. What's going well and how can we make that better? And therefore, it's the science of flourishing, of how to take things going from being good to being great.
I love that.
And that's really, that's where I've spent a lot of my time over the past 15 years in our work together. And, I guess probably if, Todd and I think about all the projects we've been involved with, probably the main place, like Todd said, that we've been spending so much time is that people yearn for this thing called marriage. It's their number one priority. It's the reason why they work so hard to provide for their family and build this legacy. Mm-hmm. And what we found is that this massive discrepancy between what people hold to be true as far as their ideal goal of life and actually how much time they put in, to get ready for that and to prepare for that.
Right.
And if there's anything that we've been involved in, I really feel it's the world of marriage education, which unfortunately we feel is a huge gap, and we're trying to do our best to fill it a bit.
I think it is such a necessary area. As a marriage family therapist myself, it's an interesting dynamic. I'm divorced, and there's this, paradox of a marriage family therapist who's gotten divorced. And then it's easy for people to assume, oh, you don't know how to make marriage work. And yet I also happened to marry my high school sweetheart. We were together since I was 13 years old. So what the hell did we know? And yet people at any age, it doesn't really matter. What the hell do people know? And so I find that people either emulate what their parents had or they go opposite of what their parents had. And there's no further discussion. And, I once went to a conference that I thought was like the ultimate of conferences. It was John and Julie Gottman, who've been researching marriage for over 40 years, and Dr. Dan Siegel, and, neuroscientist, mindfulness director. And he was combining these areas of relationship and psychology.
And you cut out there for about 45 seconds.
Okay, so I'll go back. We'll get that part edited out. My internet is a little bit unstable, so hopefully that clears up. Okay. So this idea in relationship of how do we even know where to begin? Either we're emulating our parents or we're going the opposite. But couples, I find, jump into relationships so quickly with marriage as a goal. And I once heard someone say, you can have 5 good meals and some great sex and you're now in a relationship. And you've not yet discovered the underlying, what are your values? What are your needs? What are your expectations? What was your childhood like? What do you define as a healthy relationship? So how do you guys begin to train people in your institute to start having these questions? And then what are the answers?
Okay, so that's the $1 billion question,
right?
and we I think we have a couple of aspects, some of which might be idiosyncratic and applicable to certain groups and not, but I think some of which are universal. I think one of the most universal things that people need to get straight, and this goes to your 5 good meals and some intimacy, and boom, we're in, and people have a I would call it a somewhat immature view just of what a relationship is. It's not like those meals and that intimacy doesn't mean something.
Sure.
But if you don't understand that that's meant to be a stage 1 part of the relationship, which then leads you to a completely bigger, more mature, longer lasting stage 2, by the way, where those still play a role. We still want to eat together, we still want to have intimacy.
Right.
But I'd like to share maybe an idea from Jewish mysticism, which is probably a 3,000-year-old idea, but I think it has great applicability, and it's just kind of one of these cosmically powerful ideas. There's a vision from the mystics that everything in reality has 2 phases. There is I'll call it in my own language, the inspiration phase, phase 1, powerful, sparkling, mystifying, uplifting, in order to get you involved. And then that doesn't last. And then there's a much longer phase of trying to rebuild that through your work to make it real and make it your own. So let me give you a very simple example: childhood versus adulthood.
Yeah.
Right. What's childhood? Childhood is this incredibly sparkling, beautiful, wonderful. Children are so amazing and they're so interesting because today she's a ballerina, and tomorrow she's an astronaut, and the next day she's a surgeon, and the
she
next day
believes it to be true. It's not imagination.
Absolutely, and the beauty of childhood is that you can be anything, and it's inspirational. The tragedy of childhood is that you're really nothing. Now we go to the much longer phase called adulthood. Having traversed this feeling of I really could be anything, now I have to make the incredibly difficult decisions. And the word, we always like to point out that the word to decide is related to the word homicide, which means when I make a decision, when I decide something, I'm killing off some possibility. It's going to be this job, not that job. It's going to be this city I'm living in, not that one. This car, not that one. This person I'm committing myself to, not the other one.
Right.
And so if you don't make that decision and cut away all the many, many, many things I could have been, you'll never become anything.
Yeah.
And therefore, adulthood is the process by which we actually have to go from the inspiration phase to a real building phase to actually become something. Now, take that in the realm of marriage. So there is this incredibly magical period called romance, that fire and those sparks. And that is like it's a cosmically, beautifully delivered experience that we all crave.
The brain supports that because you're getting this huge oxytocin dump. The problem is when that's permanent.
That's exactly right. And that part, and there are parts of us which, if they do not then transfer into emotional and spiritual connectivity, the simple physical piece of it will fade away rapidly. So therefore, stage 2 of marriage is the part where I say, okay, now I'm in this. I got interested. Now, the problem usually is that right after the romance phase ends, which can be very quick, it could be quite, a couple of months, it could be a year, but it could be also a few weeks or a couple of months. People get the sense of, oh my gosh, she's not the one I thought she was. He's not as cute as I thought he was. She's not as funny. He's not as smart. And then we go, life has tricked me again. I got to go look elsewhere. When in reality, the mature person says, wait a minute, I got involved with this. And it could be that now I just simply need to do the work of saying, I'm going to commit myself to being the person I need to be to bring out all the greatness in that person. And we're going to build something together based upon commitment and work. And we're going to regain that love, that inspiration, that fire through the work of giving to each other, as opposed to it being given to us free as a gift.
It's such a beautiful description. And, one of the things that John and I love doing in doing work together and doing couples work and couples coaching and couples workshops is not only are we educated and trained in this field, and yet we're in partnership. So we get to practice this together. And one of the things that we are very honest about saying is, hey, here's where we still get stuck. And so just so you love somebody, just because you're committed to somebody does not mean it's always going to be ease and flow. And when it's not, it's so easy for people to say, oh, like you said, this must not be the person for me. And I think people have that misconception that it's a one and done. Right. And when we show up in our authenticity and say, yeah, it took days or weeks to feel fully reconnected. And here's how we're working on that. Here's what it looks like. But I know not everyone's going to have the framework, the language, the skills, the vulnerability, the communication to be able to even know how to do that. So how are some ways that you guys in what you teach people, give them some of that framework or language. Like, what does that look like in practice for what you're teaching people? And one quick question, are most of the people coming through your institute that you're training men, or is it men and women?
The actual institute it's a men's institute.
Okay.
And one of the things we found is, I hate to say it this way, but men generally need a lot more work in this arena than women do. I don't mean to say something which sounds so prehistoric, but there are certain built-in problems that men often have in terms of their framework and their ability to give, their ability to emote, their ability to listen, their ability to be empathetic. There are many, many issues. And so,
and then part of it's socialization of men. Part of it is patriarchy in marriage. Part of it is the definition of he's the provider, she's the homemaker. And now that we've evolved to 2 dual income households, and now those roles and identities have shifted. One of our, and we'll get you to hop on in a second, Peter, but one of our favorite resources we talk about is the work of Terry Real in his book, How Can I Get Through to You? And this is an amazing book. It's about 15 years old, where his basic concept is what you're saying of, he's basically saying to the guys, you need to listen to her, because so many women will say, I'm unhappy in my marriage because I want my husband to be more present, more aware, more affectionate, more communicative, more sexually sensitive, or, whatever it is. And the men are unhappy in their marriages because their women are unhappy with them. And
100%.
This idea of, hey guys, listen up. She's been evolved to understand her emotions better. She's been, socialized to communicate in a different way. She can name her emotions based on that socialization. So, okay, so the Institute is for men because they need a little bit more training. It's not their fault.
Well, we're also operating sort of within in the work that we're doing in the Institute itself. We're operating within kind of a Jewish traditional framework where there is a lot of education for men and women, which is separate. And it happens to be that one of the things that is most successful that it produces is actually really quite strong relationships, because people get both the women and the men are getting trained, and they're getting trained without the entanglements happening at the same time. And then they tend to be entering, with a somewhat more mature perspective. And then we basically we're in the trench. If they want us to be, we're in the trenches with them as much as they want. And with most of them, we are for a period of time as they begin building and expanding the relationship, starting their families, etc. And it's really been quite an incredible thing to be a part of.
So with many couples that you see, let's help identify, because, with this idea of going from surviving to thriving, I think people tend to, at least, the populations that I work with, the marriages are good enough. They're not great. So maybe define some of these areas that you see in which it's just okay, and maybe provide some examples of some of the work and the tools to take it to that next level.
So I'll take this. You asked as far as what do we do with these people, getting them ready for marriage. So it's basically 3 areas that we explore. Number 1, people have to know a lot about themselves, meaning, what are you looking for as an individual? Not just tonight or this weekend or as a quick relationship. What are you looking for? And even more than that, what are you bringing to the table? Meaning, do you come from, do you have a certain background, or do you have a certain, character trait which could create a lot of difficulty? Who knows? So that's basically one thing that we do with the students.
So
the
deep
second
level
thing we
of
do
self-awareness.
A deep level of self-awareness and a deep understanding of what their long-term desire is. Okay, because
so
a lot of us in the world of relationships, things happen short-term, meaning we see somebody we like right now. We hope what we like right now is going to work out for the future. And then people wake up and they say, whoa, this was great in college. This was great for the weekend. But here we are now trying to raise a family together. And this is, we're not on the same page. Number 2, we deal with people getting the right paradigms, for marriage. And if you don't have the right paradigm for it, if you're going into it the wrong way, then that's a huge problem.
So speak a little bit more to that, of what those paradigms may look like.
So I'll tell you, let's say one fundamental paradigm you just touched upon that we speak about a lot is that people always think, and this is unfortunately, the world we live in, especially via our life through cinema and and all our dreams of romance is that people think that great marriages happen. If I meet the right person and it's meant to be, it's going to take off and things are just going to be from here on in, fantastic. And what we always say and we speak about a lot is the idea of great marriages are built.
Mm-hmm.
You can take two amazing people and they get married and things can fall apart very fast. If people don't realize that you have to build a great marriage, the whole thing is destroyed and it can be an absolute disaster.
Well, it crushes the whole Disney paradigm, right?
Unfortunately, the whole Disney paradigm only shows you, that initial flash of romance and inspiration, which is great, but that's easy to find. Anyone can find that.
Yeah.
And when you look at a great marriage, although a great marriage has to have that romance and has to have all those things, but if you're just relying upon that, everything gets old very fast. And therefore, you're going to be very frustrated very soon into that relationship. So that's an example, let's say, of one of the many paradigms that we'll teach them. So because when people have the paradigm clear of what they're going into, okay, now it's a different story.
Right.
And the third thing we'll do is give them lots of practical tips as far as these are things that your marriage needs. Your marriage needs this in order to thrive. For example, one of the places in the field of positive psychology, which I've spent a lot of time on, is the whole field of gratitude. Now, usually people are amazing at sharing gratitude to those individuals that you don't really know. If I go to Starbucks, I leave my credit card all of a sudden at the counter, and now I'm walking out and some guy runs after me. Hey, sir, you forgot your credit card.
Yeah.
Wow. The greatest guy in the world. We take a selfie. I tell my kids about him. I call the guy every Christmas. It's like the world's greatest superhero just came down. But my wife, who is doing millions of things for me every single day, what happens is, especially in relationships that we're close to, we create expectations. And therefore, usually when you have expectations, you have a huge void of gratitude.
Yeah.
And so let's say an example of a practical thing we'll speak about is the importance of infusing, especially your marriage, with gratitude, and not just the idea about that, actually how to do it. Those are kind of, if we had to give you a bit of a curriculum, that's a kind of taste of the three main parts of the curriculum.
I love that you're sharing this piece, because this is something, again, I speak with a lot of clients around, and they don't realize that gratitude is one of those keys to connection. And I remember speaking with a client years back and them saying, oh, my partner took our daughter to the dentist this morning. And I said, did you say thank you? And they were like, why would I say thank you? That was their job, to take her to the dentist. Yes, and by that happening allowed you to go to the gym before you got to work. And by them doing that allowed them to, have the daughter recognize that both parents take equal care in the child. And she was very confused of, well, why would I say thank you for that? And I've seen that general example of, why should I say thank you for something that's just their job? I mean, even divorce, I've been divorced now 5.5 years. I still say thank you to my ex-husband for the work he does for our family.
This may jump into people ask us, why on earth did we call our book about marriage not a partnership? And spoiler alert, if you get it right, it really is the world's greatest partnership.
Right.
But the reason we called it that is because what you just described is the partnership mentality. Again, part of my background was in kind of Wall Street and analysis. And one of the things I once looked into when I was working with consultants was that in the world of business, there's a whole set of business structures called the partnership. And most partnerships fail. Now, you would think they usually fail because bad business model, bad marketing, not enough revenue, whatever it is, not enough finance. It's not true. A reason many, many partnerships fail is because of the set of expectations that the partners walk into, which is that a partnership is you have your rights and your responsibilities. I have my rights and my responsibilities. Generally speaking, I always look at myself as doing what I'm supposed to do. And I look at you as you're never doing your job. And if you do it, don't expect a thank you for it, because you're just doing your job, which you owe me. That model is lethal in the world of marriage. It's just lethal. And can I tell you one story that
Please.
also we found very, very powerful? We described it in the book. One of the things that we always ask our students is, what do you think makes a person love another person? What causes love? This may be the most fundamental question that a human being needs to know the answer to, and how many of us really know the answer to it or have thought about it? What causes love? So there was a famous piece written by a rabbi in, I think, the 1920s or 1930s, and he wrote an essay on love. And in it, he asked the question, do I love when someone gives to me, or do I love where I give? Now, this story became relevant. I was once a part of a group of analysts. I was representing J.P. Morgan with a couple of other of my colleagues, and we did a big piece of research with McKinsey & Company. It was a great, consulting firm. And there were basically 6 of us on this. We chartered a plane and we took this big piece of research to all their clients and all of our clients over a period of about a week and a half. So we got to be good friends, and every single night after crisscrossing the US, we'd be at 30,000 feet discussing life. And on one of those evenings, this young analyst from JP Morgan said to me in front of the group, he said, I'm married now for 2 years. He said, I got to tell you something. He said, I've really fallen out of love with my wife. So I was like, well, how come? He says, well, she used to do this for me. She used to do that for me. She used to cook, she used to cook, and she used to really take care of herself. And she used to do these favors for me and this and that. And she hardly does anything for me anymore. So I said to him, the problem is, I said, you have a totally backwards view of what causes love. Now, at that moment, 6 pairs of ears all turned, and said, what are you talking about? This isn't general, discussion amongst a bunch of analysts at 30,000 feet. So I said, well, there was a famous essay on love. And basically what the question was what causes love? And a classic question that was asked was, who loves more? Who loves who more? Does a parent love a child more, or does a child love a parent more? Well, if it's a function of who gets the most, you would think a child would love the parent, right? Parents do nothing but give. A good, healthy parent gives and gives and gives and gives and gives. Child takes and takes and takes and takes. So you would think a child would be madly in love with a parent, and a parent would but it's the exact opposite. The parent madly loves the child, is totally invested in the child. The child may or may not love the parent in return. A person has a dog who takes care of a dog. The person loves the dog, or a plant, or builds a home, or anything that we invest ourselves in. And so I said to him, maybe you've got the whole model backwards. And maybe if you would just start giving to your wife, maybe you would come to love her in a different way. So there was kind of a silence. This guy came back to me about a month and a half later at work. And he said to me, I want to tell you something. He said, I decided, I didn't really believe what you said. He said, but I decided I might as well try it before we get divorced. He said, so I started giving to my wife. I started doing things for her. He said, I have found myself that I have fallen madly in love with her again.
Wow.
And it was an amazing, eye-opening aha moment, because not only was it a real world affirmation of a very ancient idea, but it also showed me how not ready to face the challenges of marriage even very intelligent, very educated, thoughtful people are. They just walk around with the wrong model in their head. And so the whole model that we pursue in the book is about giving, and many pathways that giving can bring your marriage not only to average, to stay married, but really to bring it into as you say, the thriving condition.
Well, and I think at the root of that, someone has got to be fundamentally have a growth mindset. This is one of the questions that when John and I are leading couples workshops, we get asked, or I get asked, even just in my own work, of how do I know if this is a relationship worth saving? And our answer has to start with, you have to both fundamentally believe that growth and change is possible and that you want it. Because I think that stagnation, the complacency, where the marriage and relationship starts to die is when there's no growth.
100%.
And I've heard mostly more from men than women of, when the woman wants to grow and wants more and to have more of this relationship you're describing where there's more giving and growing. And the man, generally speaking, doesn't have the same need and feels it's good enough as it is, and comes across with this belief and statement of, this is just me, love me for me, accept me as I am. So there's a paradox there, because we do want to accept each other as you are, and it's not selfish to want more. It's not wrong to want more. Like, if we're not growing, we're slowly dying, right? So it's this beautiful paradox of, I fully accept you, and
100%.
We found that, when people say, when people are trying to think about, when they're thinking about in some way in a bubble, in a lab setting, as far as what kind of person you're looking for, we always say that what has to be at the top of the priority list is someone who is growth oriented, and not just someone that speaks about it, but they have shown different places in their life where they have tried to grow and they have tried to change, whether it's an aspect of themselves or an aspect of their professional life or whatever it may be. And when people are like you said, you're either moving forwards or backwards.
yeah,
There is no such thing as kind of just coasting. And unfortunately, what happens is, a lot of times, the marriages you just described only move when finally that person who is, let's say, in the relationship, you have one person who's growth oriented, they say, okay, well, I'm moving on. And then the other person will say, well, okay, well, I'll change. But what we have found is that for like we said, great marriages are built. The way that they are built is, besides having the right paradigm, it's got to be two people that are willing to put the work in to actually build.
yeah.
And
you can't really do it just for the other person, because then it's going to be inauthentic, which I think eventually leads to resentment. So it's got to have that internal drive of, I want to show up as a better partner in this relationship. Would you agree?
I would agree. And I'll tell you something interesting, which may be a little bit outside of the box, but
I like
people often
outside the
ask
box.
us, this is going to be a bit outside the box, but one of the most powerful tools that we find as far as how to work on your marriage, the most practical, powerful tools, is like this. And it's a very indirect way of how to work on your marriage. People, if you look at individuals, usually what happens, we have a couple of core negative traits in our life. Let's say, for example, let's say I have an anger issue, and that's a real deep part of who I am. I'm going to get angry at work. I'm going to get angry with my parents. I'll get angry with my kids. I'll get angry at the neighbor. I get angry at the school board meeting. That anger manifests everywhere, okay? Because it's such a deep part of who I am. It's going to come out in so many different places in life. So I'll bet all the money in the world right now that anger issue is also going to come out in your marriage. Mm-hmm. And one of the most powerful things we see, and it's really it's actually a way of giving in a very funny manner, is when a person decides, let's say you take a spouse, and the spouse says, listen, right now I want to work on my marriage, but I'm going to leave my spouse out of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take full responsibility for what I am bringing to the table. And I guarantee my anger issue is causing a lot of problems in this marriage. So you take a spouse, okay? Let's say you take me. So I'm going to say, my wife, good luck with everything. You're off the hook right now. I'm going to find a therapist. I'm going to read books on anger. I'm going to take a webinar on anger. I'm going to listen to these 5 podcasts on anger. And I'm basically going to immerse myself in me taking responsibility for my anger issue. So therefore, if you come into my bedroom tonight and you see on my bedside table, you're going to see 5 books. You're going to see my phone packed with a couple of podcasts. You're going to see a notebook that I got at a seminar. I am deeply immersed in the world of me taking responsibility for my own anger. Now, all of a sudden, my wife is going to look at that and she'll say, whoa, that's quite inspiring. What am I bringing into the table? What am I bringing into the picture here? What are my core issues? Maybe I can attack one of them. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, what happens is that when people just take responsibility for their own world, for their own baggage, for their own issues, mm-hmm. and you're doing it for the sake of the marriage, it can be one of the most powerful ways of how to work on a marriage, where you basically take a husband and wife, you split them, you get them to really try and conquer one of their core issues, or at least make some growth towards it.
Yeah.
And they're doing it for the sake of making the marriage better. All of a sudden, the upward spiral that you see in that marriage is absolutely awesome.
It's beautiful, and it takes a good level of not only self-awareness, but ability to receive the feedback, because that's assuming the guy's able to acknowledge that the anger lies within him, because many cases the wife would say, you've got an anger issue. And he's like, well, if you weren't always doing X, Y, and Z, I wouldn't be angry. So really it's your fault.
Right.
Yeah,
We're amazing at we're amazing at making all of our issues situational, meaning if I didn't work with you, and if I wasn't married to you, and if my neighbor wasn't this person, and if Starbucks was a bit closer to my house, I would not have an anger issue anymore.
Right. And this is where, for me, the root of all growth is awareness. Without awareness, we stay stuck.
Well, and it's funny because, in every other part of our life, we have a review process. There are very few businesses which do not have a very strong feedback loop one way or another. So in my world of Wall Street, where they would pay you, 90% of the money that you made, they would give you on one day based upon some assessment that they made, right? You had a review and they said, here's how you did, and here's what we're going to pay you. In the world where you may not have someone that's reviewing you, but you either have clients who come back to you or they don't come back to you, or, your marketing campaign works, doesn't work. In marriage, there is sort of an indirect review, which is, does my spouse seem to be happy? Mm-hmm. Many of us cannot really handle the direct review of, how am I doing, honey? And, and you have to be, again, you're right. You have to be a mature person, and you have to be really invested in making yourself healthier and making your relationship healthy. But we titled an entire chapter of our book, "It All Depends on Me."
Yeah.
And that was really to try to dispel, again, another false notion that people walk away with, which, well, if she would only start working on it, then I would do my part. We've seen marriages go from mediocre or worse to really strong when one side simply said, my spouse is not doing much of anything right now, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start doing extra things. I'm going to start either working on my character issue, or I'm going to start giving to my spouse, or I'm going to put it into my calendar that said, that pops up 5 times a day to call my spouse and tell him or her how much I care about them, how much I'm thinking about them. And again, there are dysfunctional people who will not respond to that on the other side. But we've found that it, generally speaking, creates a virtuous cycle where if one side says, I am going to start making it happen here, irrespective of what you do. And Peter gave you a beautiful example of that, like working on my character issue. Right. So we have found, generally speaking, that the other person will come along in that. And then the people get into a beautiful cycle. And by the way, this could be a date night thing. I mean, first of all, people should have a date night. Let's throw that one out there. Everybody talks about date night. Very few people actually do it on a regular basis.
Well, I love what Esther Perel, sorry to jump in, but Esther Perel talks about this. And she will say, we schedule everything in our lives. We schedule the dentist, we schedule meetings, we schedule parent-teacher conferences, we schedule a haircut, we schedule a lunch out with a friend, but we don't schedule sex and we don't schedule a date with our partners. And we expect it's just going to happen. And yet when we schedule it, there's a perception that it's taking away the spontaneity or the spark or the excitement of it because it's now on the calendar. Rather to take the idea of, I'm scheduling it because I'm placing it at a high enough value to be able to clear everything else off my table or my mind to say, I'm focusing on just this right now.
100%. We have couples who we have literally, couples who love each other and do want to have a relationship with each other, but they're so busy because you wind up with both of them working, and both of them have very demanding jobs, and both of them have their social lives, and both of them have to exercise, and both of them have all the things that they do. And yet if you ask them, what's the most important thing in your life? Oh, it's my marriage, it's my marriage. Which of course you say, well, gee, let's look at actually how you're
dividing up your time.
Right. Yeah. And we've had couples where we've actually written on the back of a napkin a contract that says, here's how we're going to schedule our date night. Yeah. And the date night is, and we usually advise them, try and do it on a Tuesday night, because 40% of the time something's going to come up with one of you that means you can't do it. But make sure that the priority is that it slips to Wednesday night. It doesn't go away. And make sure that the date night has certain fundamentals in it. Our phones are off. we try to make sure that we look good, smell good, feel good. By the way, a date night can simply be coming home with Chinese food and a bottle of wine and
Right.
changing the lighting, or getting a babysitter and going. And there's so many ways to do a date night that don't have to be complex. They don't necessarily. By the way, now in the world of Corona, which we happen to be speaking about right now,
Yeah.
right? What's amazing is that people are not doing date nights, even though they're living together and are never going out. But that's okay. That's another
I want to
discussion.
ask about that, actually. I'm glad you brought that up because, we are in the midst of this global pandemic at the time of this recording and the time that this summit is going live. And what I've been saying, and I've probably said it, almost every interview I've talked about in the summit so far. So everyone who's been watching these interviews, you're going to know exactly what's coming out of my mouth. But I think in the area of relationships, it's probably the most important is what I feel is what was once under a flashlight of awareness is now under a floodlight of awareness. That anything in the relationship that might have just been just under the radar and just be able to not be paid enough attention to because it was good enough, or maybe I'm even too busy to pay attention to it because of all the other scheduling, time issues. Now it's like the veil has been pulled back and it's exposed. And I think now is the best time ever to get really curious. Okay, how can we have our relationship thrive right now? Because guess what, guys? We've got the time. We no longer can use the excuse of we don't have time to dedicate to this. And now that all of our healthy and unhealthy defenses against paying attention to the issues are stripped away. We can't stop at the bar on the way home. We can't go to the gym, guys' night out, girls' night out, whatever it is. So we have an opportunity here, which to me is a gift. The universe is saying, hey guys, here's a gift of time. What are you going to do with it?
So it's interesting. I spoke recently about this idea of dealing with coronavirus and marriage. And, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that the opportunity right now, a person can grow and make steps in their marriage that could take you years to accomplish. Mm-hmm. But it's really it has to be a choice. Meaning, does a person look at this as this is the opportunity, or, oh my gosh, this is driving me absolutely crazy? And it's really a choice people have to make. And if people make the choice and they say this is the opportunity, and if you try and be a little bit spiritual about it, you are cut off from the entire world except for really one main person, which is your spouse. Mm-hmm. So I don't care what religion you are. Obviously, there's an opportunity in front of you that we have to face and say, what am I going to do with this? Mm-hmm. And that is the one relationship which is in front of us 24/7, weeks on end. And I think that you're 100% right. And I think that couples, even if you're struggling in your marriage, let's say you have some couples out there in bad marriages, but they say, you know what, now let's go for it.
Yeah.
So much can be done. And I really feel it's about not only saying this is my priority, but let's do whatever we can to hyper focus on it. I think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. It's a once in a marriage opportunity.
It is.
If couples take advantage of it, it can be, looking back on this, even though it's been obviously a world of disaster, it can be the time when you look back at, your years of marriage and you say, that's the time when things really changed and things got better. In my mind, I agree with you. It's an opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah, it's interesting. My daughters and I, they're 14 and 16. The other night, the three of us were having dinner, and the whole conversation was based on what are you going to miss the most when quarantine is over? Because, part of this positive psychology that you're trained in, Peter, is having the awareness of what's the lens through which you're looking at the world, right? If you look through the world through these, blue colored lenses, assuming that blue is an emotion of, fear, anger, frustration, sadness, depression, anxiety, where things are wrong, or these rose-colored lenses, which is the positivity, the gratitude, the appreciation, the being in the present moment. And it really is a choice on which lens you choose to see the road. Now, maybe you've been inclined or socialized to see it through one lens, and it's also a choice to switch. And That's hard. Like I've been bringing this up with clients in my Facebook group of what are you going to miss in quarantine? And people are like shocked. What do you mean there's something to miss? It's like, you guys, this is a beautiful gift we are given right now. How are you using this?
Right.
And I love that, you spoke on this in about relationships. Can you just say a little bit more of, in that talk that you gave for coronavirus and marriages, just, broadly, what are some of the other ways couples can use this gift?
I think that there is, I think that, more than anything else, I think right now it gives couples a real chance to really assess where their marriage is up to. Without a proper starting point, you can't make any growth. Any GPS system that you're part of, Waze, Google Maps,
Yeah.
if you can't get the location, okay, set up as far as where you're really up to, then there's no start. Like you said, without real awareness, there's no growth if you're not aware of what's really going on. So I think on one hand, it's an opportunity for couples to really have those difficult conversations as far as how are things really going, and in all conversations, I think things should be going based off of where things going well and where are things not going so well. So I think
So
that
would you look at categories of that? Like, how are things, because things might be going well in certain areas. Maybe things are going well in our co-parenting. Maybe things are going well in our division of labor, but maybe things are going horribly awry in our sex life or in our ability to communicate authentically.
So I would tell you this, in the ideal world, okay, if you could really do this properly, you take a couple, you put a big whiteboard in front of them, you put all the categories of their marriage, and you put in there two sides of it, where are things going right and where are things going wrong in all of those categories, okay? Mm-hmm. So first is to get a clear assessment as far as where are things really up to. Then a couple really has to decide, well, okay, where do we want to get to?
Yeah.
Okay. You can't do any growth if you're not sure, like these GPS systems, where do you want to go? They're not going to tell you, hey, go here, go there. They'll sit and stare at you for years if you don't type anything in.
Be pretty interesting to see if you did that, whiteboard separately and then show it to each other, because I'm wondering how much of those are actually going to align in the perception of where they're at. That's just interesting diagnostic assessment in of itself.
That's a huge thing. As we all know, you can have a couple and they each have two different stories, two different narratives as far as what's really going on in this relationship. So 100%. So I think there's got to be a time right now of a clear assessment as far as where are we up to, and a clear assessment as far as where do we want to get to. And you have the time to do that. And what I find is everyone gets so caught a lot of times in the how-to part of it. Okay. But I find that's actually the easiest thing to figure out, because if you sit down in your marriage right now and you say, you know what, we really want to change things. Well, let me tell you something that we've all seen in our lives. When people really want something, they make it happen.
They find a way.
I see with my children. Okay. All of a sudden they want a new bike or this thing. All of a sudden they think so far outside the box. They stay up late, this, that. It's like their IQ jumps thousands of points. All of a sudden,
there are many lawyers figuring out how to their case.
Okay. So I say to my daughter, okay, honey, do your math homework? Well, I'm tired and this, blah, can't do it. Can you help me? When people really want something, they make it happen. We live in the world today of information overload. There are practical tools and tips about how to get things. So if couples during this time can, A, really figure out where they're up to, and B, really brainstorm what they want to accomplish, and they get excited by that, the tools and the information is out there. And so I think that this is the ultimate time of where couples, if they really take advantage of this period of introspection, they do it right, just a couple of great nights together with a nice bottle of wine and a nice whiteboard, I think what you can change is the entire vision of where your marriage can get to.
And it's creating intention. It's slowing down and it's being intentional. And perhaps, the path of the relationship, the trajectory was just off and running, and there was love, but maybe there wasn't intention of what's the path forward. I love the work you guys are doing. It's such necessary and important work. So thank you for what you're creating. And thank you for coming on to the summit today. I think we could have talked for at least another handful of hours. So I do look forward in continuing a conversation with you guys at some point further. I know my podcast listeners would greatly benefit. And how can people find you? And what is it that, the best way to get a hold of your information or more resources with you guys?
Sure. The book is called Not a Partnership, and the website, which gives you access to, the work that we're doing, video work, the book itself, other video, other resources that we've put out there, is called www.notapartnership.com. And you can basically access everything we're doing through that website.
Well, that will definitely be available to our viewers. And thanks you guys both so much. It's a pleasure to be able to have you come from all the way across the world and make, this summit really just have an extra added tool, because I think people don't want to think that relationships take work. And work doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means it's a high on your values.
Right.
This is 100%. Worth it enough to me. And I love that through your research and through what you've seen in your students, that relationships can really thrive.
Really thrive.
And people, I think, get jaded. But
we're willing to work for everything that was important to us in our life. Marriage is no different. And just like I'm willing to work to get to the top of Everest, I can get to the top of Everest in my marriage if I put in the work there as well.
I love it. Beautifully said, Todd. Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much.
Thank you so much.
Stay healthy and stay safe and be well.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.